Welcome, everyone. I'm Spiro, joined today by a very special guest who is an attorney and an author who has written, debated, and practiced widely in the area of constitutional law, human rights, and popular culture. I'd like to welcome the founder of the Rutherford Institute, the legendary John W. Whitehead. Mr. Whitehead, thank you for taking the time to be my guest today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, sir.
Now, you've been a very prominent voice championing civil liberties for decades, including several landmark cases with the Supreme Court, and you've been warning of the growing police state and surveillance state and the erosion of liberties for decades now. Now, Mr. Whitehead, we find ourselves in a dangerous and important time in our lives and in our nation's history. What is your view of the current state of the nation as we see blatant, organized chaos across the nation with a heavy-handed response from the police state?
Well, we are in a police state. That's the point. As you know, the government can close down anything they want to anytime, and it depends on the situation. I think most Americans will go along with it, and that was really alerted to us years ago by Carl Bernstein of Bernstein and Woodward, who exposed the whole Nixon corruption. But Carl Bernstein said, but while he was a reporter, he realized and come to find out with New York Times, some of the major TV networks at the CIA was actually vetting the information, and some of the reporters were actually CIA agents. So we're dealing with a total program here of, I would say, disinformation and control. And we're already in the police state. The problem with some of these people out there that are rioting right now, I understand their frustrations. They are playing into the hands of this because most Americans are going to say this has gone too far, let's crack their heads. Now, just was recently announced, William Barr, Attorney General, is sending in federal prison riot teams now into Miami, D.C., out of prisons. Well, so what does that say? Let's take the symbol there. Are we in a prison? Essentially, we are. We're basically prisons. The word lockdown, by the way, which was used all throughout this situation, is a prison term. You lock down prisons when the rioters get a little out of control. And with this COVID-19 situation, we saw the same thing. We were prisoners in our own home. You couldn't leave because everybody was afraid of this or that. So we're in the police state. Will we get out of it? I don't know. I don't see any prominent figure, in my opinion, speaking up and saying we're in a police state, stop this stuff. You have people like Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz saying the government can come to your door and forcibly vaccinate you. If that's true, you have no rights whatsoever. So I would say the Bill of Rights right now has been flushed down the toilet. The Fourth Amendment, I mean, police for years have been doing this stuff. But if you remember the Boston lockdown, all the Ferguson situation that was going on for a while, people get irritated. But I would say this, that we have to be very, very careful. I've just said it already, but with what we're reading, what we're hearing, because if the federal government wants to extend their power further, they can, in a way, and maybe not, maybe I'm wrong on this, but possibly infiltrate groups. If you go back to COINTELPRO, the FBI, the government has a long history. Back in the 60s, the FBI infiltrated hippie rebel groups, grew long hair, smoked pot with them, and reported and watched everything they were doing. And you don't think they're doing it now? We're not dealing with St. Jesus when you're dealing with the government. You're dealing with an entity that's run by corporate mega corporations like Facebook, Google. And they work with the CIA and all the groups across the world now tracking your location data. So we're in a total surveillance state as well. So I think it's a situation where there are very few people alive today that are thinking at all. We've had all the great science fiction writers warning us for years, but have we been listening? I don't think so.
Now, Mr. Whitehead, President Trump recently stated that he will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization, which many people at this point would probably agree, as Antifa literally could fit the description of terrorism, using violence to achieve a political means or a political agenda. Now, is this the right move to make?
Well, the question is Antifa, who and why is it Antifa? Who's funding Antifa? Is the government involved with Antifa? I don't know. I don't know if the President of the United States should be labeling anybody. He could label the Rutherford Institute a terrorist group. No, not if we have an elected government. That's something a commission should be set up, controlled by Congress, and they should analyze these things. No, I don't. I disagree. I don't think the president of the United States should be labeling anybody a terrorist group. When I look at some of the things the United States does, I would say that's pretty terrorist. Like Trump's already dropped almost 80,000 bombs in the Middle East. I would consider that terrorist. And to be honest with you, against another, you're talking about children or whatever getting killed over there. So I don't think anybody with that kind of record has a right to be labeled anybody a terrorist. Or you're a terrorist by just having me on the program. And I've had government agents tell me that. I mean, they look at me and go, boy, you're on the government list. And I'm going, what list is that? And they look at me. I've had NSA agents talk to me and who've read my books and agreed with what I'm saying. They said, man, you're one. So it's a scary scenario. It can get out of, and in my opinion, it can get out of hand. Things like what we're seeing right now, and what we've not learned the lessons of history. People like Martin Luther King, for example, he would be looking at this going, why the violence, folks? You're going the wrong way. What did John Lennon say, the former ex-Beatle and activist? He said two things the government can't handle: humor and nonviolence. We give them violence, and they go, yippee, we can take more control now. And that's exactly what you're seeing them do. And of everybody, not just the so-called terrorists, but any of us out there that they can control, they will do it.
Well, yes, I mean, they could, as you correctly pointed out, not only designate Antifa to be a terrorist group, but this could be a slippery slope in my view. And this is what I wanted to ask you. What's to prevent this president or even a future president from declaring other groups terrorists? Like, for example, anti-vaxxers, as they're called, right? What if people start protesting a mandatory vaccine, if it becomes mandatory at this point, and they're deemed a public health threat? I mean, very slippery slope.
It does away with free speech, free thought, freedom of association, the right to be secure in your homes and persons and papers without the government, watching you. I mean, people like Thomas Jefferson would go, what the heck are you people allowing them to do? So, no, I don't. I think that's ridiculous. And again, we don't have all the information. Most Americans have no clue what's going on anyway. They're watching CNN or Fox or whoever they're watching, which are major corporate medias run by people who want to make money off of the people who are watching the programs through their commercials, etc. So that's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with reality now. We're not dealing with a country that's free and open. I mean, listen, Mark Zuckerberg was in the White House in October and had two dinners with Donald Trump. They didn't tell us what they were talking about. You're kidding me. I paid for the dinner, but I don't know what's going on with my tax money.
That is a good point. Now, this terrorist designation, as you clearly stated, I'm sure it would have impacts on people's civil liberties. But, what would be the purpose behind designating them a terrorist organization? What would this allow the government to do that they would normally be restricted from doing?
Oh, well, stick the FBI, NSA, CIA on total, and they could wipe them out. They can arrest them and take them away in the middle of the night. Remember, the National Defense Authorization Act, the President of the United States can label someone a terrorist or extremist, and they disappear to wherever they take them. Probably a FEMA camp, which I've been told by former NSA agents exist on military camps now. They were built by Halliburton. Halliburton, the big corporation, got $385 million to build them. They can just disappear. You won't see your lawyer or your family. So that is really scary. Designating someone as a terrorist group. I mean, if that's that particular one group, whoever that we know they are, and they actually had their members, were out with guns and shooting people or throwing bombs through windows. They were the actual people, not just people hanging around them. You might have some kind of a case for that. But again, the president he's not Adolf Hitler. He's not Stalin, whoever he might be, some dictator. He shouldn't be labeling anybody a terrorist, because I can look at some of the actions I'm seeing the government do, like I just said, or some of the police over the recent year. 80,000 SWAT team raids are smashing through people a year. They're shooting people in their beds, and they get away with that. Now that sounds like terrorist activity to me, but the government can do it. It's okay, man.
Now, Mr. Whitehead, I wanted to get your take on President Trump's use of the military during this civil unrest. Now, for decades, you've been warning of the threat of a domestic standing army in the form of militarized police. And now, in addition to having that, we actually have the military police and the National Guard on the streets of America. How is this legal? I mean, I thought through posse comitatus, that prevented the military from being deployed domestically.
I don't think under posse comitatus, the military is not supposed to act as local police, but they're doing it. I mean, lawsuits can be filed now. You can fight it. I don't know how the courts are responding to that now because the courts are so darn timid now. The courts we have are not the courts I grew up as a kid. They're bureaucrats in robes. They fall over in 2 seconds and salute the government because they're afraid of public opinion. And they're not the brightest people in the universe, by the way. Judges, I'm sorry, they're political appointees. And most political appointees, I can point at several now, we want to talk more deeply, that don't have half a brain. And they're easily controlled by the people, the so-called deep state, if you want to call it that, or the corporate state as it operates. So now these federal riot teams are into cities now, you're kidding me. Those people are what are they trained to do? To smash heads of prisoners. And many of those prisoners shouldn't be in the first place because they're in private prisons too, where the government makes money off of them. Look that up. Anyway, I would tell people to go to Rutherford.org, and everything I'm saying, by the way, is in my commentaries and books, and it's all footnoted, credible sources supposedly. And I would say this: that no, if all the equipment that cops have today, the MRAPs, the grenade launchers, all the surveillance equipment, if they can't handle this situation, just minimally in many cities, then we've got a problem anyway. But yes, we have George Washington said it very clearly, do not have a standing army on American soil. We have standing armies. They're called the militarized police. For the National Guard, the governors have a right to supposedly block under posse comitatus the federal government sending in any kind of troops. And if some of these governors had intestinal fortitude, they'd say, we're not putting up with this. Our police are going to handle this. And then he'd look at the cops and say, get this thing under control and do it the right way. No more violence.
Now, Mr. Whitehead, you have been very gracious with your time. I wanted to get your take on like what you see moving forward as we approach the presidential elections and the supposed impending second wave of the virus and the coming experimental vaccines. It seems like the recipe for a perfect storm, perhaps, as we are already living in a form of martial law right now with these lockdowns and the curfews and et cetera. What do you see in the coming months, and what are the solutions for the people?
I've been arguing for years we're already under martial law. The militarized police, you can't walk down the street, decide to shut a street off, you walk with those policemen, and they've got armored gear on, grenade launchers, helmets. There's no hope on that situation. I would call it Operation Mind Control now. We're being psychologically re-engineered to accept the fact that we can live in a lockdown culture. That's exactly what's happening with the COVID-19 situation, contract tracing, giving over your DNA, your bodily fluids to people who show up at your door. All that we're seeing now, federal troops being sent in here and there. What it says is that the bureaucrats who run the system aren't doing a very good job down below, supposedly. Like I said, Trump's got to send in federal troops or riot troops. So I would say that the future ahead does not look good. There's only one hope left. And I tell people the most amazing words, and we all forget it in the Constitution, is we the people. We the people mean we're the government. We forget that. No. We're the government. We live in a representative democracy, or whatever you want to call it. They represent us. But we're too busy sitting on our butts not doing anything. Take over your local city governments. Under the 10th Amendment, you can nullify acts of the federal government. Get involved in your situation. If you have children or grandchildren, it's time to act now. And here's the other thing. Teach them the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They don't learn it in school anymore. I talk to law students and lawyers that can't tell me what's in the Bill of Rights anymore. So our educational system is failing as well. So I think we just need to get our acts together and get involved in our local governments. It's the only way. Washington, D.C. is not going to listen to you. As a recent study out of SMU came with an economic professor who says he studied where psychopathology moves in this country or doesn't move, and he came to the conclusion that it does. It actually, his name is Ryan Murphy, that actually concentrates in Washington, D.C. And psychopaths are They want power. They have no empathy whatsoever. They want money. And unfortunately, and if you look at things clearly, the government sees us as data bits now, just like the corporation, something they can control, and they want our money, our taxes, and we're overtaxed. While, by the way, the president goes golfing while the economy is collapsing, and we're paying for that. That's absurd.
Mr. Whitehead, thank you so much. Do you have any final points you'd like to share?
Now, I think the final point is I'm trying to get people activated, get involved at your local government. In your small towns, you can take over those things, and you can start with the SWAT team raids. Stop those damn smashing the doors in the middle of the night, hurting and shooting people. Abide by the Fourth Amendment, which gives us a secure home and secure persons. Okay, that's how to start.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitehead, for being my guest today. I do encourage all of my viewers to make your way over to Rutherford.org, as Mr. Whitehead regularly writes very important articles over there. A lot of great content there, and you can also find Mr. Whitehead's books there and much more. Mr. John W. Whitehead, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sign up and get our newsletters, okay?
Sign up and get the newsletter at Rutherford.org. The legendary John W. Whitehead, thank you so much for being my guest today, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Have a good day.